was a bone-shaking blow as the 35-ton mech touched down, its actuators struggling to absorb the impact. Artificial bones and muscles creaked ominously, and sensors flashed for attention. Yet the mech remained intact, legs bending to absorb the stress. One knee grazed the ground, tearing a jagged rent in the turf, and the Panther fell forward. Fujimori's right hand shot out. The sensor mesh built into his gloves recognized the action and produced a near-perfect mimicry of the Panther's own right arm. The massive hand dug into the turf, but the machine remained upright. Pride may come before the fall, but Panthers are eternal. In the pantheon of old-school battle mechs that have been the workhorses for the intersphere conflicts over the course of the last 4 centuries, the Panther earned its place through sheer numbers and hard-headed determination. Conceived as a powerhouse 35-ton battle mech that could hit way above its weight, the PNT-8Z was first produced in 2739 on IlClan, which eventually would end up in the realm of the Draconis Combine following the collapse of the Star League. IlClan weapons built their reputation on the Panther's success, though it was not a journey without issues. The initial Panther 8Z was armed with a Tronel large laser system, which was supposed to be the battle mech's primary weapon, but when put to work fighting pirates on the edge of the periphery, it proved to be temperamental, too short-ranged, and caused excessive heat buildup outside of its design specs. The Talos 4 short-range missile rack was effective, but mech warriors increasingly felt hobbled rather than aided by the large laser. Eventually, the outcry was so intense that IlClan stopped production of the 8Z in order to retool for an alternative primary weapon. The savior for the battle mech arrived in the form of a Lord's Light PPC. In order to install it, a heatsink had to be removed from the Panther, but the additional range and damage of the PPC was too good to pass up. I think the resulting Panther 9R was the origin for the Draconis Combine's love affair with the PPC, though that is just conjecture. Constructed around a Linux 140 Fusion engine and IlClan 56 carrier frame, the opportunity cost graph was pushed away from speed and toward armor and weaponry. With a top speed of only 64 km per hour, the Panther 9R was just barely over half the speed of a Jenner D, and just 2/3 the speed of a Firestarter 9H. However, what the Panther lacked in speed it made up for with a nod toward agility, with the installation of 4 Lexington lifter jump jets and the previously discussed particle projection cannon and SRM-4. Used in combination by a savvy mech warrior, the Panther 9R was expected to apply consistent force to opponents on the battlefield while remaining agile enough to avoid incoming fire. The combination of PPC in the right arm along with an SRM-4 in the center torso is an interesting split, and I've seen some complaints about it in the past. I don't mind it, though that single ton of ammunition in the left torso is a liability until we get down the timeline and reintroduce Case. Panthers were intended to be the angel on the shoulders of other light mechs which needed the powerful punch of that PPC. From all available information, it outperformed in that role. It was such a success that many thousands of Panthers were produced through the remainder of the Star League, through the Succession Wars and Clan Invasion, and even up to the current day in the Intersphere timeline. The Panther's pilot returned fire. The PPC underslung on its right forearm swept an azure beam out, but missed wide. The SRM's shooting from its chest hit hard, chipping armor from the commando's chest and right flank. Its number 9 became a 7 as a result of the assault, but neither mech's armor had been breached yet. Down below, odds were shouted, bets were taken. Society doyens studied the combatants with a fascination bordering on the vulgar. Men joked and shouted, women cheered, spectators hid their faces behind their hands or bumped chests when their champion did well. As previously hinted at, the Panther was popular with the leadership of the Draconis Combine and among the DCMS rank and file. Now when I say popular, I'm not painting a picture of a friend you take out to dinner knowing that he or she is going to be ordering the same thing they always order when they eat out. I'm talking about a level of infatuation that leads to your friend buying the restaurant and viciously burning down all the other restaurants in the area so their favorite item on the menu is protected. When the Lyran Commonwealth created their own new Succession Wars battle mech to chase down and hunt Panthers, the Draconis Combine brass devoted millions of C-bills to create their own new mech that would hunt those wolfhounds down. Now, admittedly, the wolf trap did not work out as well as they had hoped, but I think it still backs the thesis statement that I can no longer remember. Oh yes, the Combine loves the Panther. During the Succession Wars and even up through the War of 3039, it was not uncommon to see lances and companies entirely consisting of DCMS Panthers. In my research for this video, there are multiple novels where the protagonists reference companies of Panthers roaming around and causing mayhem. I'd say the Combine love for the Panther is an obsession, but I'm not sure I can blame them. After all, if 1 PPC is good, 4 is better, and 12 is fantastic. Sign me up. Okay, not really. Please, I don't want to join the DCMS. Oh no, it's too late. I can hear them outside. Avenge me! Avenge me! She raised her right arm, training her primary weapon on the group of Kurita soldiers 100 meters away. Her Panther was an older model PNT-8Z rather than the newer 9R, a relic of the Star League era carrying slightly more armor and a Tronel large-bore laser rather than the standard PPC. She squeezed the trigger and a tightly focused bolt of coherent light sliced through the center armored soldier of the 3, sending the other 2 scrambling in opposite directions as they fled their post. Perhaps it was due to this love affair between Dragon and Panther that the mech really hasn't been fielded by other Inner Sphere House militaries outside of the occasional salvage refit in a pinch. There were often other options produced closer to home or better fit the ethos of the house units. The Combine was just fine with that, and Elshane Weapons eventually opened a second production line on Jarrett just to meet the demands from the DCMS. On the battlefield, the Panther gained the reputation for being resourceful and incredibly irritating, especially in non-traditional battlefield environments where the mech's jump jets and PPC could be combined to pop-tart and shower targets with fire only to disappear as quickly as they appeared. Through extensive contact with the Panthers in urban environments, Lyran Mechwarriors began to refer to the mech as an alley cat rather than its given name. While the Panther couldn't go one-on-one against heavy mechs, it was just dangerous enough to make those DCMS Mechwarriors very happy. One of the more notable Panther pilots in the timeline was Minobu Tetsuhara, who was born in 2992 and served the Combine honorably throughout his life. He would have likely had a rather tame career had his destiny not become entwined with Jamie Wolf and the Wolf's Dragoons in a chance encounter in 3021. Tetsuhara's personal honor conflicted with the military ambition of the Combine on multiple occasions, and it led to Tetsuhara facing very tough decisions between loyalty to the Dragon and his personal respect and sense of duty. Ultimately, it would cost him his life. Early in his career, Tetsuhara piloted a family Panther 9R, which he had eventually had to give up. The battle mech he referred to as Katana Cat served him well, and he was quite fond of it. Thankfully, the mech not only survived, but saw multiple Tetsuhara owners over the following decades. Its upgrade from 9R to 10K, then 10KA to 10K2, and finally up to the 14R standard mirrors the progression in technology that so many other Combine Panthers saw across the past century. Both the other Panthers launched flights of SRMs at the Wolfhound. The missiles scattered impacts on and around the mech, scoring armor but doing no serious damage. The wounded Panther's PPC shot lashed the Wolfhound's already damaged left arm. Alarm lights flared to life in the Wolfhound's cockpit as the computer reported the limb completely severed at the shoulder. In one of the earliest First Succession War reports from Panthers in the field, the 2nd Legion of Vega deployed on the planet Quentin with reorganized units built around the Panther in their light lances. With the aid of the element of surprise, the Panthers were able to hit way above their weight against the defending Davion 42nd Avalon Hussars. Forced to fall back from the largest city and spaceport on Quentin, the Hussars were the first of many units to flee frustrated under seemingly endless barrages of PPC fire. Construction of the Panther continued throughout the Succession Wars, and 2 more production lines were set up, one on Jarrett and one on New Oslo. For the Draconis Combine, this turned out to be an issue as the New Oslo plant was deconstructed in the 3039 formation of the Free Rosselhog Republic, and just over a decade later, both New Oslo and Jarrett were lost to clan control. IlClan weapons had to scramble, as immediately following the beginning of the clan invasion, production of the Panther dropped to near zero. A new production line was started on Krennis, but it took time for it to get up and running. It's this delay and crunch on supply lines that can partially explain the lackluster Panther 10K introduced in 3051. Produced both by IlClan Weapons and Gorton, Kingsley and Thorpe Enterprises, the Panther 10K incorporated an endosteel frame to buy enough mass for an ERPPC. An Artemis IV fire control system was added to that SRM-4, and case was placed into the left torso to protect the mech from ammunition explosions. The jump jets and armor weren't messed with, and unfortunately neither were the 13 single heatsinks. While the ERPPC improved the range of the 10K over the Succession Wars Panthers, it did so at a painful spike in heat. If that PPC was fired on the run, that left the mech at 4+ into the red, and +6 if it leapt its full 120 meters. While I am by no stretch of the imagination a min-maxer, the Panther 10K is a big disappointment in comparison to the other 3050 TRO upgrade designs. The ERPPC is too warm for a mech with 13 single heatsinks, no matter how you slice it up. Someone in the Draconis Combine must have noticed this was an issue with the 10K because the 10K-A Panther was spotted in 3055, which downgraded the ERPPC back to the original PPC, but otherwise kept the endosteel, case, and Artemis IV fire control system. Even though this variant wouldn't blow any socks off, it was preferable to running a hotbox and not being able to fire that ERPPC when it counted. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending upon your personal alignment, the shift in production to the 10K across multiple production lines, including a new one controlled by the Wakizashi Enterprises, led to the newer version completely eclipsing the 9R as the most commonly seen Panther among the DCMS. Euphoria after victory is dangerous, but what's even worse is arrogance. You stop thinking and learning. Thankfully, hope was on the horizon for the Panther, and very quickly, just 13 years later, 13 years, oh, sweet baby Jesus, okay, just 13 years later in 3064, a new variant graced the glorious Dragon's military units. The Panther 12A was once again blessed with endosteel and, thankfully, 10 double heatsinks. The venerable PPC was removed in favor of an ER large laser in the right arm, a medium pulse laser in the center torso, and a Streak SRM-4, also in the center torso, which was fed by 1 ton of case-protected ammunition in the left torso. The 2 lasers were aided by the installation of a targeting computer in the right torso. Overall, the Panther 12A is the Helm Memory Core upgrade that we should have received in 3051. It's heat efficient, hits decently hard at all ranges, and the improved accuracy of the ER large laser led to more shots on target than the ERPPC could accomplish. It's just a shame the Mechwarriors had to wait till 3064 to get it. Leaping ahead another 5 years, the next significant upgrade to the Panther arrived thanks to the wacky and creative Word of Blake engineers, who sought to create a wildcard light mech which could pack a wallop. Thanks to the installation of improved jump jets, the 14S's movement profile was shifted to 466, making it an even more agile threat. In that precious right arm weapons mount, they added a snub-nosed PPC, along with an additional half-ton of armor. The 14S was given 2 rocket launcher 15s installed into the left torso, offering a one-time chance to do up to 30 damage in addition to the snub-nosed PPC. One notable pilot of the Panther 14S was Sela Teresa Martinez, who was gifted the battle mech on Luthien by less than typical methods. If the reports are to be believed, Martinez acted bravely in defense of a hospital where a certain Yakuza boss was being treated. Due to her valiant efforts to stop the Blakist attack on the hospital, the boss was able to escape, though her Panther 12A was destroyed in the process. After receiving her gift of a new mech, Martinez was redeployed in actions against the Blakists. The Panther 14S is an interesting build, and I like the inspired use of the improved jump jets. However, being left with just the PPC once the rockets are gone has me thinking there are better options out there. Outside of a very narrow mission profile, the 14S is not who I'm asking to the dance. Before we move on, it's worth noting that the numbering of the Panthers doesn't necessarily indicate the order on the timeline. For example, the Panther 16K arrives on the scene in 3070, yet we're going to cover the 13K later. It's a bit of a mess, but we'll get through it. The designers of the 16K took advantage of 6.5 tons of new light ferrofibrous armor and endosteel to reduce mass wherever possible. The 464 movement was preserved, and thankfully the mech was also granted 10 double heatsinks to keep its right arm mounted ERPPC functioning turn after turn. Packed into the center torso were 2 Streak SRM-4s, which were fed by a single ton of case-protected ammunition stored in the left torso. The 16K is a meat and potatoes upgrade that doesn't go too far with an XL engine or fancy bells and whistles. It can just do its original job of maintaining fire on distant targets while remaining agile. I like that a lot. Then he lifted one cloven metal foot and smashed it down onto the Kintaro's bulbous head, turning the cockpit into a tangled ruin of metal and flesh. "Not too sporting," Arthur said. "Wrong career or wrong world," Tancred shot back. "Take your pick. Now let's—" "Arthur!" The warning was a second too late. The Cyclops had already delivered a gut punch with its Gauss rifle, and the Panther a cerulean stream of energies from its PPC. With a violent shudder that wrenched one control stick from Arthur's hand, the Enforcer 3 doubled over and went down in a sprawling slide. There were a few other variants in the following years, including the Panther 10K2, which quote-unquote fixed the original 10K by adding the double heatsinks it should have originally had. With 12 double heatsinks, the mech's heat issues were resolved and a second SRM-4 was added. For the 12K2, it rocked 12 double heatsinks and ERPPC and swapped out the SRMs for an MRM-10 rack, which boosted the mech's damage potential in the mid-range at the cost of some accuracy. It's quite functional if you can stomach that +1 on the to-hit for the MRMs. The next substantive upgrade for the Panther was in 3076 with the introduction of the 13K variant, which benefited from significant changes. This version was produced by Wakizashi Enterprises from an assembly line on New Samarkand, deep in Combine territory. It seems they learned their lesson about putting production lines too close to the front lines. The endosteel was gone and the armor returned to standard plate, but the mech was instead given a more powerful XL engine and an extra light gyro to reduce its mass. The biggest selling point for the 13K was the installation of the Lexington Heavy Lifter improved jump jets, which allowed it to leap up to 240 meters, or a 588 movement profile. The mech even got an entirely new look, which is considerably less cat-like and more, well, it's hard to describe, but let's just move on. The 6 tons of standard armor is a drop from the norm, all in service to agility and the mech's weapon systems. The traditional PPC, or large laser, in the right arm was removed and replaced with a Tygart Incinerator plasma rifle. Now before you get too excited, temper it with the knowledge that the mech carried just 1 ton of ammunition for the rifle, leaving it only 10 opportunities to put that glorious fire on target. At least the SRM-4 is still there, though it was moved to the left torso to make room for the XL gyro. And it also had a fun name. It's the Telos 4 short-range missile delivery system. It's sort of like ordering food delivery, but instead of room temperature fries and a burger with a bite missing, you get 4 short-range missiles packed with high explosive. Due to its high price and niche loadout, the 13K was reserved for sort of light battalions and the Genyosha. At the same time, many of the original 10K Panthers saw refits which brought them up to the 10K2 or the 12K2 standards. Overall, I really want to like the 13K, but the way they achieved the mass savings with the XL engine and XL gyro hurts me in my wallet, and the single ton of plasma rifle ammunition creates a tight leash for a mech, which is known for being able to consistently put fire on target throughout a battle. The improved jump jets are great, and the 588 movement profile due to the larger engine is fun, but this really just doesn't feel like a Panther anymore. Our next to last official variant is the Panther 12KC. Isn't the naming convention for the Panthers fun and easy to remember? It is a Dark Age variant that showed up in 3131, and it has some interesting new bits and bobs. It returned to the use of the endosteel and the 464 movement profile, but also had 9 tons of ballistic reinforced armor. I suppose this is one that could find some good use against the Federated Suns. I wonder if anything interesting happened between the Combine and House Davion in the coming decade. Oh wow. Okay, that's a whole thing. Yeah, okay, quite useful. The most notable new feature for the 12KC Panther was the inclusion of 10 clan double heatsinks. That might sound odd, but there are only 5 included in this size engine, so 6 more had to be placed into the internal bits of the mech. This could only be done with clan tech heatsinks, and only barely. The mech's primary weapon was an ERPPC, though the traditional SRM secondary was swapped out for a standard medium laser. Finally, a C3 boosted slave computer was added to the left torso. While the ballistic reinforced armor is a neat gimmick, I think it would be fair to point out the lack of proverbial oomph that could set the 12KC apart from its previous iterations. At least it is heat neutral, even alpha striking on a full jump jet leap, so it's got that going for it. Roger that, came Tom Flannery's voice. The Panther moved in on his mech. It outweighed the Vixen by a few tons, but overall the clan mech was better armed and armored. Plus, the Panther relied heavily on its arm-mounted PPC, which gave Flannery a slight advantage. He fired his torso-mounted medium lasers at the oncoming mech, beams slashing into armor and sending up thick clouds of superheated steam in the frigid air. The Panther responded with a volley of short-range missiles, several of which connected with the Vixen's torso in small explosions. Our last official variant is our pre-IlClan era upgrade that was first spotted in the field in 3140. Produced by Alshane Weapons, coming full circle, the Panther 14R is similar to the 12KC but goes even further with some cool tech trinkets. Designers maintained that classic 464 movement profile but added a supercharger to the center torso which could boost that top speed up to 484 when advantageous. 10 clan double heat sinks were added to keep the mech cool, and a standard inner sphere ERPPC was added to the right arm. It was backed up by Streak SRM-4 in the center torso. The 1 ton of ammunition for the Streak launcher was placed into the traditional left torso location, along with Case 2, removing the threat of those dreaded ammo explosions. The 14R is a solid machine and a good example of how new technology can be used to update a classic 3025 TRO design. If you're playing this far down the timeline, I would say give it a go. Now, for a totally unofficial and non-canon Mechfrog variant, I wanted to do my best to fix the 13K into something a little bit more reasonable. Structurally, I went with endosteel and an XL gyro, but the 175 Fusion engine was standard rather than an XL. The 585 movement is achieved through standard jump jets instead of the improved variety. The variant's 7.5 tons of standard armor max out what a 35-ton mech can carry. I retained the plasma rifle in the right arm, shocking I know, but this time it has 2 tons of ammunition instead of just 1. 20 shots without requiring reload is quite respectable. Backing it up in the left torso is a light PPC, which can actually fire further than the plasma rifle, but it does have that pesky 3 hex minimum range. Thankfully, if something like a Wolfhound does wander too close, the emotional support small pulse laser located in the head can be quite useful. The 10 double heat sinks, inner sphere versions this time, are effective for general use, and even trying to max out the heat gauge with an alpha strike and leaping the full 5 hexes will only leave the mech at +2 heat into the red. While it isn't going to put up big numbers, it can affect change on the battlefield through prudent use of that plasma rifle. Hitting the right target at the right time to not only do that 10 damage but also add 1d6 heat could turn the tables on a mech that likes to dance on the heat curve. If you want to give the Panther MF a try, I've included the record sheet for it in a link found in the video notes below. So why do we love the Panther? Fans of the Draconis Combine can point to its connection to their faction and the long history dating back to the Star League. Lyran fans can offer some begrudging respect for it as the inspiration for their Wolfhound. The rest of us can admire it for an effective use of a PPC and a 35-ton battle mech that can hit above its weight and keep lighter mechs safe on the battlefield. The Panther is a good starter mech for those getting into the game, and while it could benefit from a little bit more variation in some of the refits over the years, it stays mostly true to form. Good on you, little Panther. Good on you. Thank you as always for coming by as we talked BattleTech. If you enjoyed the video and feel it was worthy, don't forget to give it the thumbs up button, and even hitting that subscribe button will make it much more likely you'll see my nonsense in the future. For those who have taken that extra step of becoming channel members and supporting on Ko-fi, thank you very much. Without you, none of this would be possible. Until we meet again, please take care of yourself and your loved ones by making this world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.